I'm super excited to announce the arrival of the Standard Age Signature Collection with the release of the Avant tee. Borrowing the term from Audi speak, this shirt is a daily driver offering an ideal level of utility. 100% cotton fabric developed from North Carolina grown cotton, then made, cut, sewn, and dyed within a 5-mile radius in Los Angeles, California, resulting in an incredibly small carbon footprint. These are something I'm super proud of and have worked on for years. These pocket tees come standard with a larger size pocket, so there's no need to stretch out your collar while hanging your sunglasses. The larger size also securely holds your shades for those times you lean over to tie your shoe or bend over to pick something up. The bottom contour of the pocket wastes no space the same way a triangular pocket does. The pocket size also perfectly accommodates your passport for convenient access at the gate. The sides of the shirt and under the arm are gusseted. This detail, borrowed from an ice climbing jacket, offers better range of motion while preventing your shirt's lift when raising your arms. So be it in the driver position or stowing your luggage in the overhead compartment, this is a very functional attribute. The neck is made with an incredibly soft 1x1 rib trim, which allows a clean, professional aesthetic. The components of these shirts are meant to visually interact with one another the same way the panels on luxury cars do. The shoulder and side seams do so in close proximity while not seeing any of the stitching or how they're attached. Now you might notice there's no logos on these shirts. The branding is actually done through a small gray tab on the lower left, which serves as the Signature Collection's branding. This material and color was created as a tribute to the lightweight door handles found in high-end Porsches, the king of understated performance in my opinion. Please visit standard-h.com for product images and more information. Again, I'm super excited to announce the launch of the Standard H Avant tee. I've been a big fan of today's guest for several years, so I was certainly excited to chat with him. Tim Mosso is one of only a few people I watch online for reviews and news within the world of watches. I've also enjoyed his straightforward delivery, his seemingly encyclopedic knowledge, and just the fact he and I have other interests in common such as automotive racing and cycling. We talk about how his military service prepared him for his current role as the watch specialist for Watchbox, and how his first 800 watch-related videos were shot to differentiate his content from that of blogs such as Hodinkee. Needless to say, Tim was on to something and much, much more. I wanted to get to know the man under the Oakleys, and today you will too. Tim sure has his hands in more horological cookie jars than one can even imagine, and we get into a healthy amount of car talk as well. Needless to say, I'm excited to have you hear him share it all. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time, Tim. Really appreciate you being on the show. Been looking forward to chatting with you. Are you from Pennsylvania?
No, I'm from New York, so I'm a Northeasterner, but Northeasterner by way of Miami, I guess, because I was with Watch You Want from 2014 to 2017. They moved north, merged with Govberg, and the result became Watchbox. So that brings me here.
Oh, cool. Well, then you knocked out a future question of mine anyway. What'd your parents do when you were a kid?
My parents are both nurses. My dad's a nurse, my mom's a nurse. My stepdad, he works in like televised graphics, so he's always been in televised graphics management. So when you see a Chiron on the screen or the CNN logo over the years or some outrageous poll number, that's usually him.
Oh, wow. That's cool. What were you into, like, kind of in high school? Like, what were the subjects you kind of studied?
I mean, I was all over the place. Physics was great, English was great. French was so-so, but I'm lucky because I've had a bunch of hobbies that have kept me in the French language between F1 racing and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, cycle sport in Europe, and of course, the watch industry. It was an ultra niche. It's almost like learning Latin, learning French. You feel that way when you're learning it in high school. And then you meet a watchmaker rock star who only speaks French, and you're like, thank God I can speak all nouns to him. Nouns and verbs, but only in the present tense. I'm good.
That's hilarious. What kind of music were you into as a kid, like in high school?
Almost nothing. I got to be honest, I didn't get into music until I had my first car and I had my own radio. But around the
Right.
house, it had always been my parents playing their music. And during the 90s, if you heard the kind of music kids were playing, you wouldn't be into it either.
Right.
So, like, what the hell is this? But then I discovered 80s rock and 70s rock in my adulthood, from my teens on, thanks to the radio in that car, classic rock, by way of the Eagles, I guess, and Jackson Brown. And then I kind of tended towards the harder stuff, and eventually I wound up with like Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Saxon.
Oh, amazing. What was your first job?
My first job that I consider a job was working in a deli in high school. And it was an interesting job because, for the most part, it was just disposable cash. So I knew that there was going to be a Grand Prix in Washington in the summer of 2002, and it was going to be the first auto race on the streets of DC in decades. So, that summer job at the deli basically financed a trip for myself and my friend to go to Washington and watch the Panoz LMP Roadster beat the Le Mans winning Audi R8 on the streets of DC. And it was like the greatest day of our lives.
That's incredible.
That was all the money I ever made at the deli.
Oh my God. That's amazing though. Money well spent for sure. Now then, were you in the military or am I making this up?
No, I was. From 2009 to 2013, I was in the military, and I worked with public affairs, which isn't all that different from what I do now, I guess, because it was naval aviation, which was highly technical, hugely specialized, kind of impenetrable to kind of civilian minds, like what we were doing. Because a lot of what we were doing was training, not, flying off an aircraft carrier and shooting down MiGs. So explaining a training base to the local population, you're basically doing driver's ed for pilots, which means you need a very tolerant neighborhood. So I would
Right.
help to explain the mission of the base to the folks, and I would take something that was kind of remote, technical, and dense, and make it accessible, emotional, and a little bit more open and embraceable. And that's sort of what I do with watches, because especially if you're just getting into the hobby, people talk about movements and calibers and what's in the watch. And, unless you're familiar with this stuff from years of studying it, it's almost like a watch is a black box and you have no idea what value or quality looks like. So I try to be that bridge.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a really great analogy as well. So you were in the Navy, I guess then.
Yeah, I was in the Navy, but only at shore stations. People are like, what ship were you on? I'm like,
Right.
there were air stations stateside, so not super expensive. I saw the world with Watchbox and Watch You Want. I saw the Florida Panhandle with the Navy.
Right. Okay, so you're in Florida. Got it. What did you learn from the military that you say you still use today, other than just like kind of the mentality, if you will?
I would say realistically, I learned more about myself, especially in training phases. You learn to deal with emotional challenges, especially that might be something you've never faced in civilian life.
Totally.
School wasn't super hard, but doing 50 push-ups was hard. Doing 50 push-ups with 3 gunnery sergeants screaming at you was really hard. And doing 50 push-ups with 3 gunnery sergeants screaming at you at 6 a.m. was even harder.
Right.
There's that. There's also, I think, I got back in touch with my writing skills. My first job out of college was as a securitization paralegal at a white shoe law firm in New York. I thought I was going to go into law at the time. And so writing, which had been a huge component of like my skill set up to that time, practically from when I was in elementary school, I had something published. I went years without writing. And in the Navy with public affairs, I got back in touch with that, on both the news and creative side. So the Navy kind of got me back in touch with myself. And, unfortunately, I think health wasn't great. And I decided to try my hand in the civilian sector in 2013. And then I'm like, well, I don't have to follow orders. It doesn't have to be naval aviation anymore. I'm on my own time and watches are my hobby. Why not take a stab at that? And if it doesn't work out, write headlines for one of the news agencies, like the real-time headlines you see on cable.
So was all of that kind of self-thinking and kind of self-analytics, if you will, or was that were you talking to anybody about that and them saying, Tim, you're really into watches. Like, why don't you pursue that?
Well, when I was in the Navy, I didn't make that much money as a paralegal, but in the Navy for the first time, I'm like, well, I've got a good job. I've got no debt. I'm a bachelor. I have plenty of savings. I like watches. Why not buy one? And in 2010, I bought my first luxury watch that I purchased with my own money. It was a Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm, which was as big as the name suggests. It's not quite the fine artisanal watch I would later come to like, and it was the size of a fist. But I didn't know any better back then. It seemed like the coolest thing on earth. It was like a whole watch case in one watch. It was an alarm. It was a world time. It was shock resistant, water resistant, loomed, automatic, all these cool things from a brand that sounded really exotic. And I had that watch for 10 years. It was an incredible piece. That was my first luxury watch. And I think from there, I thought, this is almost on the verge of becoming more than a hobby, because I think about only three things in my life: my job, my bike, and watches. And my bike is immediate. It's part of my life. My job is every day. But the watches, it's kind of like a community in a world that's pretty remote from me, and short of forums and like, a Blog to Watch and Hodinkee and platforms like that, I didn't really experience it firsthand.
Right.
Outside the Navy, moving back to New York, where my family's from, I had a lot more opportunities to engage in the watch world because a lot of it's, local to Manhattan. So that
Sure.
kind of got me into watches.
Well, you went through it quite quickly. So can you walk us through a little more detail, like how Watchbox came about and kind of your role there? Like, what's your title exactly?
My title, because I didn't want something that sounded pretentious and grandiose, I asked that I be called the watch specialist. I'm not the watch expert. I don't want to be called an expert. Expertise is super specialized. Like, if you're an expert in just Omega Speedmasters. Like Robert Jan Broer, he's an expert in Speedmasters. I know modern watches best, like watches made since 1980. That's what I know best. That has been my specialty. I don't call myself an expert because I learn something new every day. So if I called myself an expert today, I'd be disproven tomorrow. So I try to be humble about it and just aggregate as much knowledge as I can get.
Sure.
So I'll take you back to the beginning at Watch You On, basically how my role emerged, and then I'll tell you more about what I do. So it was easy to find freelance work on 47th Street with used watch vendors in New York City.
Hmm.
I wasn't cool enough to work with Hodinkee, but I always admired them. So I got a real boot camp type crash course in the world of watches, researching for blog articles I wrote. And I had one vendor on 47th Street, and this, I guess, shows you how much I wanted it. He would pay me $15 an article. And I eventually sent him a bill for $1,500 itemized with every article I'd written for him. And I would do this for 10 hours a day, writing for these different vendors, because they could outsource almost everything. And generally it was to Eastern Europe, but they couldn't outsource, like, to Eastern Europe and the Philippines, idiomatic English language copywriting. And that's what I provided them. So I gave them something they couldn't buy overseas at a price that was super reasonable, frankly.
Yeah.
We learned freelancers were getting, 50 to 75 cents a word. I'd be driving like a Ferrari, but I was happy to get into the industry. And that gave me a resume to show, when in 2014, a company called Watch You Want was looking for a blogger, and they posted a notice on their blog that they were looking for a blogger. And I was shopping on their website at the time because they had a pretty good website and good photos. And I'm like, well, you know what? It doesn't hurt to reach out. So I sent them, a list of all the stuff I've written. And I sent them all sorts of links, and they were impressed enough that I met with their president in New York City when she was in New York for vacation with her family, and I immediately spilled coffee all over her. But and it was a white shirt. It was bad. But I'll tell you this: I made such an impression in the interview that I got a call back, and she flew me down to Florida to meet with her and the owner and founder of the company, see if I could work in their office for a few days and give them a trial run. So the test drive worked out well. They really liked me. I really liked them, but I realized it was going to be a white knuckle ride. The traders, the salesmen, were very intense people. The
Mm.
environment was immensely competitive. It was sink or swim. With a very short leash, because the company operated on limited margins. They had limited capital. Bringing in someone who didn't work mainly on commission was a big decision for them. I
Right.
got a salary, so that was a special decision they made. So I came in, and initially their thought was that I would act as the ghostwriter for the owner, who was a good guy, but he was more likely to dictate something than to write it. And
Mhm.
he liked to speak in bullet points, so he needed someone to flesh it out in paragraph form. Fun
Sure.
guy, though. And so I would be his ghostwriter, and then I would also write blogs for them. And almost immediately, I realized that unless you've been indexing for 10 years, like Hodinkee or a Blog to Watch, you're basically going to get, blackballed from Google. It's going to be very difficult for you to get on the second, third, fourth, you know, any page near the top of a search. So I said, well, why don't you let me do video? I could just do it on my phone. There's no editing necessary. I'm sure I can do this in one pass. You won't have to do a thing. We've got a YouTube channel that we don't update. There are a lot of YouTube channels out there for small businesses that have been updated like 2, 3 times, and then they lose interest. And a YouTube channel that they'd updated a handful of times, mostly with jib jab videos, which was extremely unfortunate. Uh, but so I started doing these phone videos of watches, and I would put the watch on my desk on like a wrist pad that you use for typing, and I would have a little polishing cloth that said "Watch You Want" on it, so it was branded. We didn't have graphics. Then I
Right.
would tape the phone to the back of a chair because I didn't have an iPhone holder, and I shot 800 videos that way.
Wow. So, okay. So, what I'm picking up with you is whether it be video in one take or writing 100 different entries for $1,500, you have this unbelievable capability for efficiency. Where do you think that comes from? Like, you must be a very efficient writer with, like, I mean, you must just churn these suckers out. You know what I mean? These articles.
Yeah, I guess it's good to have a skill that's marketable. If I were born with a gift for like juggling or like a mime act or something, it would have been unfortunate. But I'm happy that I had the skill that fit. I like to joke with the people who came up, from Watch You Want to Watchbox. I say, I found a hole in the world shaped like me. So, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm lucky to be in a position where these skills can be used, and that's all down to OJ Watley, Shannon Beck, Danny Govberg, Justin Reese, the people who've supported my career here. So we got a lot of attention from those videos I shot. And ultimately, one of the people who it turned out was watching the videos pretty much, in daisy chain fashion. He was like chain smoking the videos. It was Danny Govberg of Govberg Jewelers. He was a big fan. In the past, at Watch You Want, we'd send watches for repair at Govberg Watch Repair, and we got a Christmas card from them each year. So there was some familiarity. But he wound up buying after about 2.5 years. I was at Watch You Want. He wound up buying the company, and he had kind of a broader vision because he had friends from the greater luxury industry. And so in about 2016, he bought Watch You Want. And then in 2017, a company out of Singapore that invests in luxury bought up the combined Govberg Watch You Want, rebranded it as Watchbox. And all of a sudden, I find myself as Tim of Watchbox. There's more money for video. We finally have a studio where there's a camera I can turn around and point at me for the first time.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
People were saying for the first time, I've never seen your face. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason for that, but all the same.
Get out of here. Well, question, like, what do you think is Watchbox competitive advantage over other outlets?
Well, I think number one, we're very open about what we're offering. We've got great selection. It's well photographed. We answer questions exhaustively. We have a searchable video catalog of every watch I've ever reviewed, which at this point is over 6,000 models. And we offer a 7-day, no questions asked return policy because we believe on principle that when you buy something over the internet, by definition, you can't be sure of your purchase until you've worn the watch. So I think that's kind of a big deal. We offer a 2-year warranty, which at this point is the same warranty you get from Patek Philippe. And if we're selling you an FP Journe Grand Sonnery or a Patek Philippe 5207P, and that needs service, we're sending it to Patek. We're not doing that in-house. So
Right.
the level of after sales support we offer is second to none. I'd also say, honestly, we have the best research resource for watch collectors. Whether you're a customer or not, all my videos are publicly listed. And I know for a fact when I go to watch boutiques around the world, people say they're using those videos to train their sales associates. I know that people have probably researched and confirmed their, ardor for a purchase that they would make from Crown and Caliber or Watches of Switzerland or Watchfinder. And, they find the confidence to make that purchase because they researched the watch on my reviews database.
Yeah.
So we're very open to that. I think it's good to be part of the community and give something back that's usable, whether or not you're a client. And then I also think we've got a strong team in place. A lot of sales agencies, if you've ever seen like a car dealership, other watch vendors, there's a ton of turnover. We've got guys who've been with us since 2012 who are veterans of this, and they're collectors. They know their stuff. They've done this before, and they're not just telling you that the watch is cool. They're spending their own money on watches.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's that and a lot more. The money we put into watchmaking, the money we put into photography, into video, the money we put into bringing clients in so they can try watches firsthand, creating salons for them around the world in Neuchâtel, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Cleveland, in Philadelphia. We've got affiliates around the world, including in Dubai, and we're global in that sense. So though we are online, we do have physical locations.
Oh, that's cool. So how many employees are there in the office with you?
I would say pre-COVID, because a lot of people are working from home right now,
Sure.
probably about 45 people in the office. Full staff, this building probably is about 70 to 75. And then globally, if you include, again, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, Neuchâtel, Cleveland, Philadelphia, and this, which is the internet headquarters, we've probably got over 100 people in the company.
Wow. So yeah, that's quite robust. Um,
To express just because online, and I don't mean to cut you off, but just this is important. When you've
yeah,
got a website that says you're a big deal in online sales, it doesn't matter whether you're a 100 employee global company or a dude in his basement, your website can look awesome.
true.
So it's hard to tell the difference. That's why
Yeah.
I like to say we've got a physical global footprint. We're the only pre-owned vendor that's in every market.
Yeah, that's something interesting because it was something that I battle with here, with Standard H is the fact that like I am literally a one man band. I do absolutely everything. I have no help. Uh, and so from that perspective, there's a lot of brands out there that are in the exact same shoes I'm in, but using, collective vernacular like our and we. And I struggle with whether or not to do that because it's like there's part of me that just feels it's dishonest, because it's like it's me, so should the vernacular, I mean, and this is obviously kind of way off topic, but it's just knowing what you just said about the guy in the basement kind of thing. He can look like a major corporation, and I mean, I could do the same here, but I'm kind of struggling with, do I make this more personal? Do I make it more grandiose from a perception standpoint? Because perception is reality, to your point.
I think you'd be fine saying we, because first of all, you're not a one-man band. You've got all the people who participate in these discussions who hold you in high regard. And then you've got a large network of fans and followers, and you speak for them. So I don't think it's wrong for you to say we. Now, if you say we've got a three-floor building with central air, heat, and a safe, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to say we when you represent a community and you're speaking on behalf of that community.
Well, that's really kind of you to say, and and quite literally have never thought about looking at it through that lens. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good feedback and really interesting viewpoint. Well, can you talk about just like how many cookie jars your hands are actually in? Because you do interviews on YouTube. You've got your Facebook Live, which I love. Your IG presence, obviously, your Instagrams. What am I missing?
Okay, so it's grown. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, I do third-party podcasts and interviews like Standard H. I have an Instagram page, which is all video. It's 1 minute videos, and I've got over 1,400 of them. I have timmosso.com, which is my podcasts and also the articles I write, the full-length articles. I've got the Facebook group, which is Talking Time with Tim Mosso. I've got Watchbox Studios, where I do, man in the camera type news desk commentary, and it's more of a studio type setup with a person and a face and a set. And those are features on topics and collecting. And then I've got Watchbox Reviews, which is just my attempt to create a database of searchable watch reviews, everything we've ever had. My goal is to have a video for it. So when you go to our website, you can click and watch. In terms of other stuff I do, there is other stuff. I mean, I've done global tours. I've been to Singapore. I've been to Dubai. I've done in-person events with our collectors. Sometimes I will do a collector conversation where I'll shoot a video interview with a collector and we'll post that too. Or I will do a discussion with a brand CEO, an interview that we'll post in video form. We did a lot of those at Dubai Watch Week in 2019. I've
Sure.
also written for a blog to watch and Quill and Pad and IW Magazine. So I've got a little bit of a side interest in that. That's all in promotion of Watchbox. It's not like I've got my own hustle on the side. So it's all those things: Instagram, Facebook, my website, our corporate website, the two YouTube channels, and anyone else who calls, really.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Um, Making very good use of your personal assistant, I guess.
Yeah, Brandon Wood, he's a collector of the highest order. You can find him all over Facebook. I can't even keep track of all the groups he's part of, but he's kind of my eyes outside the office, and he helps coordinate this stuff. He keeps my head on straight.
Yeah, please thank him once again for arranging this as well. He was immensely helpful. So for your approach with Tim Mosso, like your own podcast, are you doing anything to grow the audience, like, or is it just all organic? Are you taking ads, that sort of thing?
I wish we had. My watch reviews have never been advertised. My Instagram has never been promoted. And timmosso.com is just something we set up organically. We might have sent out a couple of emails to promote it.
Sure.
In emails to the people who are already within our orbit of contacts.
Yeah.
I would love to put some money into promoting it. My approach is basically respond to a demand. People were asking, can I get a podcast, when I was shooting these highly visual shows on Watchbox Studios? And I was thinking, they're so highly illustrated with 60 to 80 images per show. I don't think it converts. I don't think the format translates. But let me just use kind of florid illustrative imagery in my words and describe what I'm talking about and shift maybe the focus a little bit to make it something you can listen to. And so my idea was really just create a book on tape version of my Monday shows that people could listen to while they're working out, or driving to work.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, how did the 1 minute watch review come about?
Everyone's doing pictures, and everyone's doing pictures that are highly, enhanced, filters, saturation, exposure. And I thought, okay, look, I'm never going to spend 30 minutes preparing an Instagram slide. So let me do what I do well, which is a video. And I can fit it in 60 seconds without a second pass. So it's not like I'm going to be sitting trial and error trying to get it to work all day. So in the space of about 6 minutes, I can shoot 4 videos, throw them all up. The average value of the watch is $45,000. If one of those watches sells, that was pretty intense 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good rate of return for sure. As one of the numbered editions, the Standard H Defender Watchbox serves as a salute to our military, as well as a nod to one of my absolute favorite vehicles of all time, the Land Rover Defender. Tireless energy has gone into the transformation of a 50 caliber ammo can into a luxurious product. The box's 8-watch capacity is perfect for those with smaller collections or those traveling with a subset of a larger group. The Defender Watchbox willfully serves as your watch's go-to companion for attending watch meetups or carrying a select arsenal on a trip. Though the name of the Watchbox derives from a Land Rover, the details stem from more than one vehicle in a true Standard H fashion. The inside houses 2 wooden trays handmade by artisans in Florence, Italy from poplar wood, and then elegantly lined in the same Alcantara suede found in GT-level Porsches and 99% of modern supercars. This plush detail is the exact type of accommodation your timepieces deserve. The padded diamond pattern under the box's lid is a nod to the seat designs found in Mercedes G-Wagons, as well as the Koenigsegg Agera R. Also inside is a bespoke aluminum owner's plate displaying your name and box number. Included is a certificate of authenticity I personally fill out and hand emboss with a Standard H logo. The subtle shift logo badge on the outside is made from cast white bronze in the age-old lost wax tradition of jewelry making, then antiqued and hand-polished. Each Defender Watchbox is made to order and placed in a wooden crate that I build and paint in my garage, which will no doubt be a fun event for you to open with the included miniature pry bar. Available in 3 iterations, the Watchbox comes in signature Standard H Garage Collection Stealth, which is black with gray interior for a sleek modern aesthetic, OD Green with cognac interior for a true military look, and Omakase, where no 2 purchases are the same. You and I will exchange an email regarding your personal preferences, which will aid in the completion of your Defender Watchbox and crate as a departure from the normal offering. As an added bonus, 10% of each OD Green purchase is donated to Heart and Armor, which is a foundation focusing on veteran health. As always, thank you so much for supporting Standard H. I know before, like I'd heard through an interview of yours before, you somewhat had a theme for your collection personally. Do you have any methodologies, or themes that have actually grown over time? Because you were JLC to begin with, kind of all their sort of iconic watches, if you will, at first.
Yeah, I wanted to have one watch that represented every strength or historical proficiency of the manufacturer. And I thought that was a really great way to avoid buying everything under the sun and loading up on watches that weren't meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I think I followed that plan to a fault, because there were a lot of watches from brands as disparate as Blancpain, Rolex, Ball, Patek Philippe, Zenith that I would love to own. And I ruled them out in a way that was sort of arbitrary and self-defeating. I think collecting a watch is an intensely private and personal journey, where the process of discovery ultimately conveys a lot of the meaning the watch will eventually have to you. You know, buying can be an experience, owning can be an experience, but I find that when you've had a long journey to picking a watch, that journey imparts meaning to the ultimate purchase that lasts through the ownership experience. And I would go out and I'd buy like 6 watches at a time. Because I'm like, well, all of these are important. They fit my framework. And, you know, this fits the collection theme. These are all important. But it was so hurried. It's like ordering gourmet food and then eating it Coney Island style. And
Right. Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned the buying experience. I have yet to purchase a luxury watch in person. Every single one has either been through the internet or over the phone and it's shipped to me, which is just kind of interesting to think about given that like I certainly have access to stores, you know, but I've never had the champagne. I've never sat in the boutique. I've never done the deal. It's just kind of funny that you bring it up.
Oh, I'm the worst type. I've had the champagne and the chocolate and the truffle. I never bought a watch. I have bought 2 new watches. I bought 2 watches new, 2 of my JLCs. Others I bought from other collectors. I bought from pre-owned vendors. I bought from Chrono. I bought a watch every way you can buy a watch, and I've even traded for a watch.
Sure.
So it's not unusual to buy a watch online. For the most part, new watches don't sell online. And you think about how many watch brands there are now. A lot, but not as many as in, say, the 50s or 60s. There was a lot of bankruptcy in the 70s and 80s. So the new watch brands sell their new watches out of boutiques. And, you know, some of them now are selling their watches online, but they're treating it as an online version of a boutique, where if you buy in the boutique, the price is the price. And if you buy it online, the price is the same price. And I think because online is really the realm of pre-owned, it's the place where every watch ever made is for sale used. So take every watch ever made, go online, look at the size of that market. Now take all the new watches that are sitting in stores, look at the size of that market, it's a lot smaller. So a person can have a rich and extended and satisfying experience buying watches entirely online without ever sitting in that boutique, because most watches don't exist in boutiques. They're used watches, because watches, unlike cars, clothing, you know, racehorses, dogs, whatever have you, things that don't last forever, watches actually do last forever, which is why you have pocket watches from the 18th century that are still working. And you can go online right now and buy an old Waltham or Illinois pocket watch, you know, from the 1880s, 1890s. And that thing works just fine. Watches last forever. So they just keep accumulating. It's like those giant gyres of plastic that float around in the ocean. They last forever. They just keep growing. That's the pre-owned watch market. And, you know, there are some more progressive brands that are selling generally for lower prices that focus on doing business almost entirely online. That's relatively new. That's not Patek Philippe. That's not Longa. That's not Rolex.
Sure, sure. What by the way, thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today, because you know, this is Wednesday of Watch and Wonders week. So you must be a busy man. How do you feel about the releases so far? Are there any standouts?
Yeah. I think there's one that stands out because it's a combination of things I love. There's a 40 millimeter Breitling Premier Heritage Collection, pistachio dial, no date, green dial, Arabic numerals, really handsome watch, lovely. I love it as much as I snicker when I look at the salmon dial, you know, kind of, shall we say, high horology inspired piece.
Right.
That's the name of the game in the watch business. I mean, Zenith did it earlier with a watch that bore, you know, resemblance to a famous Geneva-made chronograph, and Breitling clearly is not a competitor to you know, another famous Geneva-made chronograph. So I thought the pistachio dial was perfect because it didn't seem like anything else. It was very original, nicely sized, and it is clearly a Breitling. It's a great offering, and it also proves that Breitling's Premier line is growing up beyond the shadow of, say, the Navitimer, which is important from a, you know, brand growth standpoint. They need to do that.
Sure.
I would also say I really loved the new. I actually kind of dug the 43 millimeter big pilot on a bracelet. It's bold, it's different, no date, handsome, nicely sized, a different kind of look. And I like the general move towards quick release straps. We're seeing it with IWC, with Panerai. It's something that Hublot and Cartier and, you know, IWC with the Aquatimer have been doing forever.
Right.
Rolex is doing it too this year. So it's really nice to see quick releases, especially ones like the Panerai system and the IWC system, where the quick release is in the strap, not the lug. So the watch will still take normally sized aftermarket straps. That's a great trend.
Yeah.
That's kind of different from the first generation of quick release systems from, Cartier and Hublot that were wonderfully convenient, but you were absolutely boxed into using their straps. Grubel Forsey's new GMT sports watch is fantastic in a kind of watch for house money way.
Right.
But it's like with stuff like the Pagani Huayra or the, Koenigsegg Gemera. It's not for me, but I'm
Right.
happy to live in a world where such things exist. It's inspiring.
Oh no, 100%. What are your feelings on the Rolex offering?
Before I opine on Rolex, one more thing I want to throw out there. The Sartori Bellard SB05 is awesome. So far, it's my favorite new watch of the year. I want to put that out there.
Okay.
New and young brand that's doing wonderful things.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. What can you give us the less than 1 minute watch review of what it looks like? Maybe your books on tape.
I would say if you look at the dials they're offering, the quality of the movement is from La Joux-Perret, the case is from Kari Voutilainen, and the dials, you can get many different types. You can get meteorite, you can get guilloche, you can get fired titanium. But when you get the watch with the fired titanium dial, it feels like a combination of the best parts of Ming, de Bethune, and the FP Journe Chronomètre Bleu, all in a reasonably priced watch. So cool.
Wow, that's quite the trio. Yeah, that sounds phenomenal. Yeah, we were gonna mention Rolex. What are you thinking?
Well, I like green dials. They're super cliched, but as a person who's liked green forever and has waited essentially, I don't know, my entire life as a collector for this fad to come, I'm going to like bask in it and roll in it and enjoy all the new green dial releases from Rolex and Patek and Breitling and Panerai, and that's just the year to date. So I'm definitely into the green dial trend. The new palm dial on the Datejust is almost as weird as the electric blue dial on the Milgauss Z Blue. So it's one of those things that proves people at Rolex are still having fun with this, which is always wonderful because Rolex is a black box and kind of it's opaque to the world. But when you see the product, you can infer something about the people designing it. And with a palm green dial, literally palm leaves on a green dial, they're having fun.
Yeah.
The Daytona with a meteorite dial on an Oyster Flex strap, that looks really cool. But I think these are degrees of difference. I think Rolex realized if it needed a colossal brand reboot or massive model launch, it got that last year with the sub. And I don't think Rolex wanted a blockbuster style year that was going to draw too much attention because the brand is already quite hot. And I think they understand that.
Yeah, if it ain't broke.
Yeah, you don't need to toot your own horn when you've got a perpetual air raid siren on. So
Right.
the new Explorers are nice. It was hard to call, the shots this year. We thought there'd be a 50th anniversary Explorer 2. It happened, but it was very subtle. Like the bare minimum that might have changed, a new movement, that's pretty much what they did. It looks good though, but evolution, not revolution. The Daytonas are all attractive, and I think it's interesting that they are trying to push precious metal a little bit more because I think that takes some of the demand pressure off steel watches. What I thought they might do was offer an Oyster Flex strap on a two-tone sub or a two-tone Daytona, just because if any modern Rolex product type needs a little bit more popularity to take pressure off steel and precious metal, it would be the two-tone, which still doesn't have quite the same collector buy-in, and less gold and more rubber would have been a great way of making it more palatable.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting take. What are your thoughts on the Explorer One? That's two tone then.
Well, I think there are two things to say about the Explorer One. A lot of us had predicted that there'd be a revival of the 36 millimeter Explorer and that there were too many three-hand, no-date, sports style, basic 39 to 41 millimeter watches in the collection. There was the 39 millimeter Explorer, there was the Air King, there was the Milgauss, there was the new Oyster Perpetual 41. And I think we all guessed that the Milgauss, being the oldest model line, was the one that would probably be discontinued or rebooted. And in fact, they decided to get rid of one of those watches, but it was the Explorer 39 that got the axe. Right. So the two-tone is cool. I think two-tone, like colored gold, works best in a small size. I think otherwise, it's one thing to be explosively extroverted in detail, and it's another thing to be extroverted in scale. But sometimes when you combine the scale and the detail, you lose some of the discretion and the taste. And I think 36 for two-tone, especially given a traditional size with traditional yellow gold and steel, it's an effective look.
Right.
We'll see if it has a lot of uptake. I think this is something that's probably aimed more at East Asian markets than North America and Latin America and Europe. So I think it'll probably find a receptive audience there.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, honestly, by the two-tone Sea Dweller. Personally, like it grew on me. I wasn't, I'm not a super stoked two-tone guy, aside from my grandfather's Datejust from the '80s that he gifted me. But outside of that, I'm not much of a huge two-tone guy. But the Sea Dweller grew on me.
It's a nicely made watch. The good thing about Rolex today is that you can't buy a bad Rolex watch. They say in the car market, like you can't buy a bad car anymore. There are no, Renault Lacars or Yugos or, self-immolating Alfa Romeos still available on the market today. Like in the 70s and 80s, you could buy a genuinely disastrous car. You could buy a Triumph Stag. Today, with Rolex, the stamped clasps are long gone. Hollow lugs, hollow center links, hollow end links, they're long gone. The Rolex that doesn't live up to your expectations because it feels like a Tag Heuer, long gone. The bracelets are rock solid. The clasps seem as though they were hewn from solid ingots of metal. And when you hold something like the two-tone Sea Dweller in your hand, the impression you get is that it might not be your style, but it feels like it'll last forever. It feels like
Yeah.
it's really impressive.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, speaking of Rolex, and I guess you alluded to Patek earlier. I'll say that. What are your thoughts on hype culture?
It's primarily a function of social media because if you look at all the things that define the actual watch market today, all of it existed in the 2000s and for the most part, the 2010s. And I'll also say this, for the most part, it's going to be Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Facebook, a little bit of YouTube, but it's not really YouTube because YouTube almost requires too much of an attention span for hype culture.
Yeah.
So I think it's unfortunate, but I also think it's something you can easily liberate yourself, therefrom, because if you can get over like the 3 or 4 brands that are subject to it, and you can get over the probably less than 1 dozen models that are involved, if you wanted to buy a Rolex Milgauss or Yacht Master 3 days ago, you would find for the Yacht Master, the 126622, that pre-owned prices are about 12,000 to 12,500, and new prices are about 12,000 to 12,500. I think it's a $12,400 watch. That watch, though it's a Rolex and a sports watch and mostly steel and 40 millimeters and looks like a Rolex with a rotating bezel, it's really not caught up in the hype culture. So even though by all rights, it should be a watch that is being sold used for $30,000 or waitlisted for years, that and the Milgauss, you'd pretty much pay used what you'd pay new. And if you order that watch new, there'll be a very short wait, if any. So the hype culture, unfortunately, is very deep and very narrow. It's kind of like the Suez Canal. And as you may have noticed, that's a recipe for disaster at times.
Right.
So, it's something where it takes two to tango. First, there's the hype culture that exists mostly online. And second, there's the individual's buy-in and refusal to direct his attention away from it. Because there are great watches in the Rolex catalog that aren't waitlisted or marked up. There's the whole world of Breitling where nothing is marked up or waitlisted. There's Parmigiani. There are uncool brands like Glasuta Original, like Longa, Odysseus accepted. Like there's so much out there that if you're willing to affirmatively search for something that's not trending, you're going to find awesome watches at great prices. And the vast majority of used watches are selling for like 60 cents on the dollar, if that. And there are hundreds of millions of them from which to choose.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an extremely valid point. Off the cuff, have you ever suffered from watch fatigue?
Well, everything watch related is ultimately off the cuff.
Oh.
Um, I was at Baselworld at 2016. It was my first ever Baselworld. And after, I guess, about 3 days of awe, I'm like, oh, I need to ride my bike and look at some cars. I need to shift gears. But I'll also say this, when I suffer watch fatigue, I try to focus on some other aspect of the watch experience that's not just that one steel Rolex, Patek, AP, or, Longa. And I'll say, look, I really want to learn more about Vacheron jump hours and retrogrades because, well, I'm burned out on new watches all that cool and quirky stuff from the 90s, like the Saltarello, the Wandering Hours, the Mercator. I really need to bone up my knowledge to be proficient. And it's fun for me to discover again. And the watch world is so large that as long as you don't let other people direct your attention, you make like an affirmative choice, you can usually step aside, take a breather, enjoy one of your other hobbies, and then get back into it from a different perspective. It's like asking an engineer, do you ever get burned out on math? Probably. But
Right.
after, engineering the race car, there's an America's Cup yacht coming up. And after that, he's going to be on a race crew at the Reno Air Races. And it's one, mathematical challenge after another, but an entirely different paradigm. And the watch world is big enough that I'm able to use that to my advantage and not burn out.
Yeah, that's great.
It's
You're a
all
fan of the Octofinissimo, as am I. What are a few reasons why?
It's great because it's a combination of two things that really work well. One is confidence of, Fabrizio Buonamassa, who's been with the brand basically since it was bought by Bulgari. The Gerald Genta brand and the Daniel Roth brand, they were bought by Bulgari from the Hourglass Holding in 2000, and they were gradually folded into Bulgari, and they became one in the year 2010, and they retired the Gerald Genta brand for a while. And he's been there since the beginning. He inherited that octo shape. It's been said that one of the reasons, for example, that the Ingenieur at IWC went from being a 70s inspired design, with Gerald Genta as the root, to being a 50s inspired design that no longer looks like the Genta, is that the design director at IWC didn't want to stick with a design that preceded his time at the brand. So Buonamassa took that Bulgari octo design inherited from Gerald Genta and said, I'm comfortable refining this instead of trying to be a revolutionary. I think, as Mies van der Rohe would have said, God is in the details, and he believed that. Let's make it thinner, let's make it finer, let's take it up market, and most importantly, since Bulgari is stockpiling dial makers, case makers, bracelet makers, and now with Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth, they had a movement engineering house. Let's put all that together in one watch, and I'm going to refine the shape. We're going to thin it out. We're going to compete in a category where Bulgari, has not been dominant in the past, which is high horology men's mechanical watches. And so it's a wonderful fusion of really original ideas like that movement, which is ultra thin and ultra wide, like the specific aspect ratio and detailing of the Octofinissimo, where, the whole thing is media blasted in titanium or polished and satinated in steel, with a dial that's also titanium and a clasp that folds into a recess in the bracelet. So the clasp is as flat as the case itself. All of those little details with the original shape added up to a winner in a GPHG, men's watch prize winner in 2017. So it's a great watch because the designer was comfortable building on history and then deciding, I'm not going to make this thing a monument to myself. I'm going to make 50 detail changes that are going to add up to a meaningful big change, rather than just saying, the Bulgari Octo is now the, I don't know, Bulgari dodecahedron. Like, I don't know, but it's not a new thing. It's a new version of an old thing, which is good.
Right. What are a couple things that you think that could make the watch industry better?
I think realistically, the watch industry would be better if first there was a little bit more standardization in the way watches are described, because that's unfortunate. I think it's really challenging, especially in the pre-owned space. We're investing tremendously in everything from refinishing to watchmaking to photography and video. So when we describe the condition of a watch, it's a different meaning than when Crown and Caliber describes the condition of a watch, Watches of Switzerland describes the condition of a watch, and Watchfinder describes the condition of a watch. And then every individual eBay seller and one horse used vendor, he also has his own definitions. So that's a little bit unfortunate. I would also love to see, frankly, a little bit more of an openness by the watch industry itself to collaborate with people who are, journalists in the industry, personalities in the industry, online folks, and not be afraid of folks in the pre-owned space. Like, I would love to be able to have a talk with Omega about Omega watches. And, I would hope they would be willing to speak with me, in spite of the fact that, my company on the Govberg side doesn't sell Omega watches. And on the Watchbox side, we only sell pre-owned watches. I don't think that in the car world, for example, there's like a festering enmity between Jaguar, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Ferrari, and Barrett Jackson or RM or Christie's. I think there's a lot of, I think, sympathetic consideration and a mutual appreciation between the world of high-end pre-owned cars and high-end new cars. And I think there's really kind of a non-talking relationship between the OEMs in the watch industry who are making new watches and the people who are determined to do pre-owned at a very high and standardized level. So there's that.
Sure.
I also think that, frankly, it would be cool if the trade shows were to come back as more of a collector-oriented experience, because I think that there were a lot of regional shows that were mostly designed to bring watches to the end user, like Watches and Wonders Miami, Watches and Wonders Hong Kong, Salon QP, Dubai Watch Week, and all those events, Watch Time LA, Watch Time New York. Those aren't like Basel World or SIHH, where the brands roll out the new models with incredible pomp, circumstance, and pretense. And if you're not a journalist or a vendor, you're screwed. Technically, you can attend, but you can look at watches in the vitrine, and that's basically it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No touchy.
So I think it would be great if in the future, all the great brands would say, look, we're going to do like one Midwest, one East Coast, and one West Coast full, red carpet rollout for people to come and see the watches. And I think a real model for how that could work would be something like the Patek Philippe Grand Exhibition, which is one of the finest and most open and unassuming high-level consumer events I've ever seen. I was in New York in 2017 for the Grand Exhibition, and Patek was very clear right at the street level, open to all. People would walk up in tank tops and flip-flops, on vacation in July in New York City, and they'd walk right into a 3-story indoor building containing 1/4 of the Patek Philippe Museum and every watch in the current collection. People were allowed to try watches. They were allowed to see guilloche and enameler and gem setters and, miniature painters working. And if you look at the incredibly human and approachable scale of that, even though it was huge, it was very intimate and folks first and folks focused. So I think that sort of thing with like a Salon QP, Watches and Wonders, Watch Time, Dubai Watch Week sort of, mid-sized show scale would be great, because then people could get their hands on things that otherwise they're only going to see online, or they're going to read about in a magazine. If there's still watch magazines out there, not as many, but there are some.
Yeah.
So I think narrowing the gap between the new watch manufacturers and clients the trade shows are dead. Like, we're never going to have like Geneva Motor Show style watch rollouts. Basel World as we knew it is gone, and so is SIHH. But if we can keep these shows accessible so people can see the watch, try the watch, and learn about the new stuff, I think we can still have in-person events that are collector-centric, even if the trade shows themselves are dead, because there's nothing like trying a watch on. In the end, owning and experiencing watches will always be intimate and immediate, and I think the way they come to customers should be that way as well.
If you haven't heard episode 1 of the Standard Age podcast, then let me tell you about my friend Tim Jackson. As owner of Passion Fine Jewelry, Tim and his team specialize in fine jewelry, as well as some of the finest independent watch brands available. I'm talking about Groenfeld, Habring, Kudoki, Roger Smith, Roman Gauthier, Sarpaneva, the list goes on. The staff at Passion Fine Jewelry is literally made up of friends and family, so you will feel right at home if and when you visit. If California is out of reach, you can absolutely email or call the shop and they'll get you sorted. Visit passionfinejewelry.com for more information. As you all know, I'm a huge fan of using the right product for the right job, and like many of you, I appreciate products with a story. That's why I drive a Volkswagen GTI. It's a hot hatch with heritage. It's also why I'm into specific watches like my Tudor Black Bay. And that's exactly why I'm a fan of the indie accessory brand Cantonment. Cantonment makes a utilitarian cloth they simply call a kerchief. It's smaller than a standard bandana, but larger than a handkerchief, which makes it ideal to tuck in a back pocket or use as a neckerchief. I always take one on a bike ride or have one with me as a backup face covering. Not only do these kerchiefs satisfy several functions, but they look great too. Each set features illustrations celebrating icons of product design like the Omega Speedmaster, the Fender Stratocaster, or my favorite of course, a classic GTI. Follow them on Instagram at Cantonment Co, that's CANTONMENT ONMENTCO, or visit them at cantonment.co and use the code STANDARDH in all caps, no spaces, for 20% off of absolutely everything in their online shop. Now let's get back to the show. Wanted to shift gears a little bit. You're an American muscle car fan, self-proclaimed liberal guy who likes cars that crap all over the environment.
Yeah. I don't know how self-proclaimed liberal I am because I'm selling luxury products to luxury buyers. And yeah, I love V8s and I love, burning rubber and burning hydrocarbons and all that stuff. I'd say I'm a mass of contradictions and an utter hypocrite. So that would be a fair characterization.
Okay, fair enough.
Big fan. I'll be honest, I walk to work, so I'm seriously denting my car guy credentials right there. And my daily driver is a 6-year-old compact plug-in hybrid hatchback. I will redeem myself by reminding you that I'm a race fan, and if everything works out, I'm going to be taking delivery of a Panos Roadster in the next week or two. So, that's about as pointless a car as has ever been invented. So you've got a car that's got 300 horsepower to basically travel from your driveway to your driveway, but it puts a smile on your face. It's not gallons per miles, it's miles per miles. So yeah, I love cars, and I think you look at me, I'm like skin and bones. Do I like ice cream? Of course I like ice cream, just not every day,
Right.
It's important. Just like if you've got a wife and kids, you probably want to make sure you're taking care of them, but you also need to have some me time and some me money and a watch that's just for you and a solid hour online playing on forums. So I'm all about a balance in life. And I guess, you could view that as flexible or you could view that as compromised, and that's going to be a matter of perspective.
It's funny just with the ethics of my company. Like I try to preach balance all the time, whether it be work-life balance or even just like, the balance within the way you exercise. You know what I mean? Like switching it up all the time. It's always a good thing, and keeping things fresh. What got you into cars initially anyway?
Apparently I'm taking this on faith, but my first word was car. So it started early. I just like the way they look, the way they sound, the fun of riding in them, the romance of going someplace. And, obviously when I got old enough, the fun of driving, the experience of driving a driver's car. It doesn't have to be 1,000 horsepower. Like I talk about the Koenigsegg and the Paganis, and I wouldn't want that stuff. Like I want a car that's very elemental, that's very involving. And, that could be something like a Panos Roadster that's got a lot of horsepower and goes really fast. Or it could be like an Austin Healey bug-eyed Sprite, 46 horsepower, 4 cylinders, 950cc, but it's fun. It's an engaging little ride. It's like a go-kart with doors.
Yeah, totally. I thought that early on, like because of, our sort of generation and age, when the Mini Cooper S was first launched, whatever, it was the early 2000s or something, like that felt like a go-kart to me. And then, of course, the Italian Job came out, and then it just made it look like a go-kart. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's fun when you see an original Mini, you're like, oh my God, it was that small? You
Yeah.
thought the original, you see the original, like, Morris Mini Minor, you're like, oh my God. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where that first generation new Mini, and I want to say it came to the US market in 2003. If you've got that Cooper S with a manual transmission, or God help us, the Grand Prix, which is amazing, you do have like a go-kart, and it's not the fastest thing on earth. Yeah, I know it's a BMW, and there are faster BMWs in the world, but how fast are you going to go on the road? And if not the road, how often are you going to go on a track? And most people won't. So I wanted to buy a car that I thought was, kind of a good forward-looking sort of use of cash, like something that'll never be worth less. And someday, who knows, maybe Don Panos will be looked at as the modern day Briggs Cunningham. It's possible. But, looking at something like a Corvette C6 ZR1 that's got 600 horsepower and weighs 3,400 pounds, and I realize as fast as that is, it'll never feel fast.
Right.
Unless you're on a track and you're airing it out. And I don't have those kind of driving skills, and I don't have a track either. So if you're driving that car 60 miles on the road, you're paying a lot of money for basically what amounts to a faster Buick. It's very comfortable and quiet and isolating. Whereas if you're in something like a Panos or a Mazda Miata or a Mini or a Lotus Elise, you've got a car with a low belt line where you can hang your arm out over the side, the wind's in your hair. Everything feels very immediate because there's no filter between you and the road. The steering rack is kicking back the way the best steering racks do. and you're just very engaged in the process. And so that's the kind of car I like. And it sort of carries over into my taste in watches. Initially, I thought I liked things that were monstrously complicated. And eventually I realized that I didn't like the size and thickness that came with complication. And I started, really switching my preference towards things that were utilitarian, like Zins, or thin, like the Bulgariato Finissimo. It's just that realization that the car you idolized as a kid, the flagship Corvette or the V12 Ferrari, might not really be what you want as an adult.
Yeah. What would you say you've gotten the most wrist time with during COVID specifically?
That right there.
Zen? Yeah. Oh, that's such a great piece.
I love it. I've been a one watch guy since 2018, and I think what'll happen eventually is my dad and my dad and my stepdad are eventually both going to have Zins. So I've given a Zin to my mom and my stepdad, and I'm probably going to wind up giving this to my dad, and that'll be his watch, and then I'll bring something in, and that'll be my new watch to wear for a couple of years. Probably an independent, probably de Bethune. I would like that. I think that's one of the few cases where my taste and expectations for a super watch actually meet the reality of the product. Those are great watches.
Sure. Well, you've kind of alluded to it as well. Cycling. You've mentioned bikes. You and I both share a love of cycling. What got you into riding bikes?
Honestly, I was a kid and I rode for transportation. So when you're a
Right.
kid, in the United States, it means you grew up, depending on whether you grew up in the 80s or the 90s, you grew up either with a BMX in the 80s or a mountain bike in the 90s. And so my friend and I, we would ride our bikes because that was our only way of getting out of our, geographic locality. We didn't have cars when we were 11, 12, 13 years old. So I'd always ridden for transportation. And, me and my friend, we'd ride to the next town, offer, I think for $11, we could buy a Taco Bell Grande meal and eat the whole thing. The Grande meal, Mexican pizza, drinks, and 10 tacos. It was
Yeah.
great, fantastic. And then as I got older, I rode a bike for transportation at college, and I didn't actually ride a road bike until I was out of college. I didn't ride a road bike until 2007. And the reason I took it up was because I realized I could go faster and farther, and I knew I had decent fitness. But these guys who looked old and kind of fat would go flying past me on the road, and I'm like, to hell with that. Slick tires on a mountain bike's not going to do it. So I'm going to get myself a road bike. And of course, my first day on a road bike back in 2007, I'm like, how do you shift this thing?
Oh yeah, the STI shifters.
Now it's like telepathic, but in 2007, I'm like, where's grip shift? Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you're riding Di2, I take it?
yeah, I actually have first generation Di2. I was an early adopter back in 2010, and it's now like an orphaned system because nothing on current Di2 is back compatible. So my bike is like a museum of technology that was considered really like forward looking in 2010. And it's like my phone, the 8-year-old phone, the watch I've worn for 3 years, going on 4. My little hatchback that I've had for 6 years. I tend to pick something I like and stick with it. And so I've got that bike that was built with like a hybrid titanium carbon frame because that was state of the art in 2010. First generation Di2 was state of the art back then. If you were a serious cyclist, you would glue up and use tubular tires. So I still do.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I've ridden more miles on tubular tires than clinchers.
Wow, that's crazy. So what are you riding? Who made the frame?
It's a Bill Holland Exigrid. It was a custom built bike that I ordered from Bill Holland to San Diego back in 2010. He delivered it in late 2011. And so it's custom sized for me, but I don't really have a weird particular shape. So not a lot of custom was necessary. I wanted him to tune the handling characteristics on the ride more than anything. So I got a bike that was not, smooth riding, but fast handling. Those are generally two things you don't get together. And I put a lot of aluminum parts on it mostly because forged alloy was the thing back in 2010. Now everything's carbon fiber, but it's a great criterium bike because if anyone ever crashes me, I'm not going to break, a stem or a handlebar or a seat post or a saddle because everything's metal, but the bike weighs 20 pounds.
Sure. Are you racing crits?
You know, I used to, and I'm thinking of getting back into it. I do race time trials at this point.
Oh, cool.
I had a bad knee that I hurt in my last year in the Navy. And, crits are very sprint oriented. And with no currencies, I'm looking like, oh God, I'd have to start Cat 5. Like I want to live. I don't want to be in a Cat 5 sprint.
Right.
I'm just waiting until my knee is strong enough that I can just ride off the front of the Cat 5 crit and not have to worry about sprinting against, Cat 5 and quote unquote sprint trains.
Yeah.
Crash 5 is not where you want to be as an increasingly middle-aged cyclist.
So, do you have a TT bike as well?
No, no, I just use clip-ons and I ride the TTs on my road bike because, unless you're doing a longer event, fitness is going to be the difference maker. If you're doing a longer event, then aero is everything. But
Sure.
if you're doing just like a short event and there are other people turning out on road bikes, you're okay. Also, frankly, I know that I can get lower than anyone else on the bike because I can still put both feet behind my head at age 36. And I'm guaranteeing you, none of the other guys in like a master's age class can still do that.
Wow.
As long as I can like fold myself cellophane style to my top tube and my bars, I'm gonna be good aerodynamically. I'll be good.
That's absolutely hysterical. You're rocking Oakleys on top of your head. You always do. What's the model? Has it always been the same model? Have you always been an Oakley guy?
I had one set of Oakleys from 2008 to 2016. Like I said, I'm one thing forever. I eat the same food every day, twice a day. So I'm very predictable.
Whoa, what's the meal?
It is a combination of cottage cheese, black beans, oranges, bananas, apples, and oatmeal.
No kidding.
I'm very boring.
What, like, where did that recipe come from? Is it all at once or you mean just throughout the day?
Oh no, all at once.
No kidding. So yeah, I was going to say it's kind of high carb, but like natural sugars as well.
Yeah, I mean it's make no mistake, like a 3,500 calorie a day diet. People are like, you're so thin. Do you eat so little? And no, I just ride that much. So if I am doing an event though, it's gonna be rocket fuel. Like the day I'm gonna be riding with a bunch of Cat ones and a pace line, that's the day Captain Crunch comes out.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. How many days a week are you riding?
I condition every day. I've got sort of a structured training. Like I've been riding with fast guys and doing like time trials for the last couple of years. But again, not really any criterium. So this might be the year I start up again. And I'm on a structured thing where it's relatively easy pace for 4 days a week. And then I do 3 60-minute like VO2 max intervals on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, I've got kind of the highs and the lows with recovery built in. You could average it all out, but I would say if you average it all out, it's about 1,000 kilojoules a day, more on those, high end days and less on the recovery days.
On the VO2 max stuff, are you doing that on a trainer or are you doing it outside?
I'm doing it on rollers in my basement.
Oh, wow.
So
Sweet.
I figure, yeah, all the sweat that generates, it's going to be the basement floor, because that's too much to clean up. And also the basement, especially here in Pennsylvania, where we get those mid-90s days with humidity in the summer, the basement's where you want to do that.
Yeah.
I do all my training on rollers, and that's something that triathletes started a few years ago that was really innovative and, in my opinion, intriguing, because people talk about riding on the road. When you ride on the road, unless you're out in Lancaster, there are stop signs, there's traffic, there are intersections, there are lights. It's going to be very stop and go. Sometimes you get a tailwind, sometimes you get a headwind. It's very hard to control the workout. And I blow guys to pieces on the hills because I ride with resistance on the rollers. I use a true trainer that's got a magnetic bar. I ride no hills in my conditioning, but I'm fast up them because, again, 5 watts per kilogram, 139 pounds, I'm going to move.
Holy smokes, man. You weigh 139 and 5 watts per kilo. That's like pro status, man. Holy jeez.
Maybe in an alternate life at this point, at the best, I'm going to be the breakaway guy who spoils the town line sprint for my wife.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I sort of interrupted us on the Oakley front. Was there like an initial ad that hooked you on Oakley, or was it just a fitment or what?
No, I was riding around wearing a set of broken wireframe fashion glasses. Like in my early days of cycling, I would wear street clothes riding a road bike. So my mom bought me the glasses for my birthday in 2008, said like, you got to stop wearing, those like T-shade things. And so, I'm like, please, thank you. So I wore those from 2008 to 2016 when the lenses at that point looked like they'd been assaulted by a Brillo pad. And then a friend here at Watchbox said, Tim, it's time for new glasses. And we were on a visit to New York where I was actually hosting an auction. I was the color and knowledge guy, and they had an auctioneer simulcasting from Berlin. We stopped in Times Square and there was an Oakley store there, and she bought me these glasses. And so people ask, why are they on your head? And I say they're on my head because I won't lose them when I'm not using them. So that's simple.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Well, just wrapping up here, and again, thanks for taking the time. Just a random question. You have $100,000 to spend on watches. What's in your collection?
$100,000 to spend on watches. I'm going to get myself a Blancpain 50 Fathoms, blue and titanium brushed finish, a ball Engineer 2 Magneto S. I'm going to get myself a MIH watch, the original one, built by, Paul Gerber and designed by Ludwig Oxlin and Christian Gaffner. I'm going to buy myself, and it's going to be a lot of smaller watches with the exception of one case where I'm going to beg and plead with de Bethune to make a watch they prototyped called the DB27 Polo that had a 5,000 Vickers coating, and apparently you could assault it with a razor or a key and not leave a mark in it. 5-day power reserve, floating lugs, automatic winding, indestructible, jump hour, scrolling minutes. And it was designed to be whacked with polo mallets. So, on top of those, maybe the Zenith Captain Windsor annual calendar palladium dial, the palladium smoked fumet that they made. And I got to give a nod to Resence. I'd get myself a Resence Type 3N, the night blue. And, I think once I've got my de Bethune with that group, I'm probably saving the rest for service, because if I don't, I'll be crying later.
Fair enough. Mr. Tim Mosso, this was a lot of fun, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you wanted to promote or anything?
Other than, talking time with Tim Mosso, I'm chatting live every Wednesday evening at 5 p.m. on my Facebook group. So if you want to continue the discussion, you know where to find me.
Sweet, which is how this thing was born. So I appreciate you giving me a shout through the comments. And look forward to being in touch.
Thanks so much.
I'd like to thank Tim again for taking the time to be a part of the show. As always, thanks to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track, as well as to Clear Audio for the noise cancellation headphones. This marks the end of season 4. I'm going to take about a month off, and I will catch you guys in late June, I guess. Really appreciate you guys listening, and I'll catch you soon. Take care of yourselves.